Today we're going to talk about why Riot keeps releasing bad agents into the game. And for those of you who don't believe me, okay, Clove you might say is kind of up for debate, but the 4 agents before that, when they released, they weren't very good. Let's go back in time and through those agents. So back in late 2022, we saw Harbor released, and upon Harbor's release, many people thought that Harbor was literally the worst agent in the entire game and required multiple buffs just to get Harbor to a playable level. From there, Gecko was then released, and whilst people like myself and many others had some faith in Gecko and some belief in the kind of general idea, it did again take multiple buffs and some big sky nerfs to eventually get to where we are today, where Gecko is finally seeing some play in the meta. After that, we got Deadlock, who, again, many people considered for a long time the worst agent in the game and required multiple buffs again just to make Deadlock even playable. And Deadlock was the worst agent in the game until ISO released, who now I think most people, again, would consider the worst agent in the game. And now we have Clove, and Clove isn't the worst agent in the game. In fact, just having refreshable smokes that you can use after death, that in itself is going to give you a fairly high floor as an agent, but I do worry about Clove's ceiling and how likely one is to achieve that ceiling and how high that ceiling is for a Clove in any particular round. And so I do think that it's pretty unlikely that Clove will see a ton of high-level meta play or really impact the meta that much. And so the past 5 agents just haven't been that good, and it's been a very long time since we saw an agent come out and actually have an impact on the meta right away. So why is that really the case? Well, there could be a multitude of reasons, of course. Maybe Riot just thinks it's a better design decision to not have something super overpowered come out and instead just release something that's a bit mediocre and then just buff it later on. Maybe they feel that that's just a safer way of designing the game. But particularly for the last 3 agents, I think there is another common theme that they share that also I feel like maybe doesn't help them when it comes to designing impactful agents on the meta. And that is that they're all pretty simple. For instance, let's take a look at Clove, who obviously the smokes and the way that the smokes work are basically as simple as they could get, right? You just click down, you then right click, and there you go. There are your smokes, exactly where, you know, they seem to come up, right? And obviously with the pick me up, that's just basically pushing a button after you get a kill. And with the metal as well, it's basically just throw it when you see them, throw it at them, shoot them because they're on lower HP. And some of you might be thinking, oh, well, it's a controller agent. How complex can controller agents really get, right? But for instance, let's just take Omen as our example, right? Because Omen, just in the way that Omen can smoke, creates complexity, right? You can do more things with the way that Omen smokes, just from the way you actually put the smokes down, right? For instance, doing a play like this, where I put a smoke up high, it then falls, it covers me when I'm actually TPing, and now I'm up here and you didn't see me. Plays like that aren't possible with the way that Clove can smoke. And it's not just Clove either, because really ISO, I think we can probably agree, has a pretty simplistic kit. And even if we go back to Deadlock, I mean, the devs even talked about creating a Sentinel agent that didn't require a ton of setup.
Can you tell me a little bit about why we've even got a Sentinel and what kind of niche she fills?
Yeah. So overall, we're always trying to make sure that we're like balancing the roles and the different play styles in the game so that long-term there's a healthy ecosystem. And we felt that there was a need for a Sentinel coming up. I know that there's been a lot of comments about that for a while now. I think for like the past 2 agents, I've seen like Sentinel win. So, you know, it's nice to make those players happy. But something we've noticed is that a lot of our Sentinels require a lot of setup. You know, you've got your like small window before the round starts where you're like running around your area, setting everything up, and be like super stressful, anxiety ridden, and then no one shows up on your site. No one shows up on your location. You get like a little sad and you're like, all right, let me take down my stuff. Let me move on over here. And so we wanted to create a Sentinel that is more about reacting to the situation at hand. How do you stall on the fly?
And so yeah, don't bother with all these complex different setups. Just react if they're there, do something, right? More simplified. But the thing is, being simple doesn't necessarily mean bad. And we've seen examples of this in Valorant, right? Like Chamber, I would say, is a pretty simple agent, right? You put down your TPs, you get a kill, you TP away, you do it again for the next however many rounds, right? Pretty simple overall in terms of an agent, but obviously Chamber dominated the game for almost an entire year. So it's not necessarily that being simple equals bad, but I do think that if you don't have something overwhelmingly good, like Chamber did, for instance, it's more difficult for simple agents to have an impact on the meta, particularly with the way the game is going, because it just makes doing big combos with other agents more difficult. You just have less options, you have less flexibility if you are a simple agent, and you perhaps become more predictable. And as I said, the way the game is moving, we are kind of going, I think, more into big kind of combos and catching people off guard with some really crazy stuff.
Both sides, but speaking of information, Martin's going to see it all. Does he commit? It looks like he does! Oh my god! We wanted individual impact. We might have just had it. Nookie, what can you do about this one?
But it's not just a thing coming in for new agents either. For instance, we've seen nerfs to the current roster pool just reducing the amount of utility they have overall, right? Like the Aftershock going from 3 to 2 ticks. It just lasts less time, less utility. The ult points going from 8 to 9 or 7 to 8 to 9 for a bunch of agents, right? You just have less ults throughout the entire game. There's other examples as well, like for instance, the Omen Paranoia. No movement velocity imparted when casting, right? So again, simplifying an ability to be standardized across the board no matter what's happening. And so that brings up the big question, of course, why? Why is Riot bringing out potentially some simple agents who are potentially less likely to have a big impact on the meta, and also simplifying some of the existing agents, or at least lessening their utility and the impact they might have across an entire game? Well, there could be many reasons why Riot is choosing to do it. One, in my opinion, is the Overwatch versus Counter-Strike kind of pull on Valorant, where, you know, how much do abilities impact the game? Is it like Overwatch or is it like Counter-Strike? And I think we've just generally headed more towards the Counter-Strike kind of side of it, and that could be for many reasons, right? It could be because they don't like the direction that the game is going in, that they fear as players get better, you know, utility use will become much better, and therefore it'll become overwhelming. Like, you know, there is many reasons why you might want to do that. But there is one reason in particular that I think is a little bit of conspiracy theory, and it all started getting planted in my mind when I saw this from 2023.
Okay, what else? We are continuing our work on bringing Valorant to new platforms. It's going slower than we'd hoped, probably slower than you'd hoped, but we want to get it right.
So yeah, Riot is releasing Valorant on new platforms, or going to, right? We know that Valorant Mobile is coming, and there's rumors about Valorant coming to consoles as well. And of course, if you release Valorant on new platforms, you're expecting a big influx of newer players. And so my conspiracy theory is this, that Anna in that video said that it's taking them a little longer than they want it to be taking. And so maybe the scheduled release date for Valorant Mobile was meant to be the start of 2024 or late 2023. And so it would make sense when you've got so many new players that you want the kind of big shiny thing that you're advertising, like, hey, play with this, it's new, you know, it's exciting, play with this, that it would be something maybe a bit more simple that, for instance, might work a bit better on a small phone screen. And so yeah, we've ended up with a slew of agents in a row that haven't had a big impact on the meta whatsoever. And part of the reason maybe is because they wanted it to be somewhat simple for newer players who are picking up the game. So yeah, that was just my little theory there, but really this is just a plea for Riot. Please make the next agent, whatever it is, please make it like complex and interesting and have an effect on the meta. Yeah, I don't want like Chamber, but if we could get like a Fade level agent, that'd be just like really, really great.